Howdy guys, welcome to another episode of my encounter series. Today I have 12 fun encounters that you can utilize in the Underdark for party levels 1 through 3. These encounters come in 2 different difficulty levels, regular and elite. They're already pre-balanced for a party of 4 using my balancing methodology, which you can check out here if you're interested. And feel free to check out the timestamps in the description down below to quickly navigate to whatever encounters you're looking for. But let's not waste any more time and jump into our first encounters for level 1. So for our first regular encounter at level 1, we have a kind of a goofy one. 3 Sparts and 1 giant rat. They're essentially despicable meme minions that are blue and like to keep pets. They're not very smart, so when it comes to their tactics, they're very cartoonish and straightforward, like pushing a player over while the other one lies like a table beneath them. But aside from that, they're just kind of smacking them with their melee attacks or throwing rocks and other rubbish at them with their slings. The real danger in this encounter though is going to be the giant rat. The giant rat is going to be able to utilize its pack tactics every single turn to get advantage on its attacks, really making that bite attack dangerous. In contrast, our second encounter for level 1 is a little bit more creepy in vibes, a little bit more spidery, but without using the same old boring spider stat blocks. Instead, we're using the chitin, 2 of them in fact. If you plan to introduce Loth or the Cult of Loth into your campaign or make it a major plot point, then these are great minions to do that with. Utilize them as guards or sentries or just regular minions of the cult that just follow their orders blindly and attack the players in a very straightforward way. But if you don't want to use a religious route, that's just fine, because chitins are actually known to form their own small colonies where they raise other arachnid type creatures like cave fishers and giant spiders. Easily opens up an opportunity to have a bunch of new fun monsters that you can use in your campaign, all within the same theme and all that makes sense together. I would highly recommend though that if you are using them in this independent manner, that you play them a little bit more intelligently. Around their base or wherever their outpost at, they would definitely set up some small traps. Nothing too difficult, just a bunch of web traps to either alert them with their web sense or slow down the party so they can easily navigate around them during combat. Another thing that I would highly suggest if you decide to use chitins in your campaign is to really utilize their climb speed. Have them come down from a bunch of different angles at your party, crawling down from the ceiling, out through the floor, over the cliff edge. Just don't come at them straightforwardly. Really make them feel like spiders. And now let's move on to our first elite encounter for level 1. Quaggoth used to be apex predators that eventually got wiped out and pushed into the Underdark by elves, breeding an innate hatred for them. I have 2 different ways that you can utilize them that are very lore accurate. The first place though hinges on the fact that your party has an elf present in it. In this situation, I would highly recommend playing it kind of like a juggernaut, bulldozing through and hitting anyone that gets in its way between them and the elf. But if you don't want to play them like this, they can also easily be used as forward scouts for the drow, as they're known to be raised kind of like pack hounds for them. If you plan to use the forward scout route for this encounter, then definitely change the playstyle for him. No longer treat it like a juggernaut, but instead kind of like a tactical bloodhound, seeking out the weakest member of the party because it's been trained to do so by the drow. We have 4 Darrow. Darrow are cunning cowards, and they should definitely be played as such. They do not believe in fair play or the rules of engagement, but winning at any cost necessary. So when it comes to tactics during combat, they're really just going to play dirty as often as they can or retreat as soon as they start losing the advantage. Pretty simple. But here are some examples of how you could do that. In terms of how the Darrow will act in combat, they will always try to go for as many advantages as they can and always stick together, ganging up on one player if they can, never really spreading out if they can avoid it. So for the start of this encounter, I would say have the Darrow attack the party with their crossbows at least 1 or 2 times, retreating backwards if they can. But if they aren't able to retreat or if the party catches up to them too quickly, they immediately drop their crossbows and switch up and go into gank mode. They're going to immediately group up around 1 or 2 players, trip them as quickly as they can with their hooked spear, and then just start beating them while they're on the ground. But should any of them fail to trip a player within the first 2 rounds, or if one of their allies falls, they're immediately gonna scatter. And once they lose that advantage, they're donezo, they're outie. For our first regular encounter at level 2, we can utilize 1 Nothic. Nothic are a fun way to kind of test the party to see if they can ever choose peace instead of war. If you want to run this test, have the Nothic appear to the party either as some weird cloaked mysterious stranger or wandering merchant, or even as a shady shopkeeper. During the conversation though, have the Nothic use its weird insight ability to glean information from the party to help make it seem a little bit more eerie and credible, that it in fact does know stuff about things, as kind of vague as that sounds. But if the party does decide to go with the peace route, have the Nothic give them a really strong strong hints on their current adventure or be able to push them towards a cool magic item that they can find nearby. But if during conversations things break down and the party chooses war, have the Nothic open up with its rotting gaze, but give the party a chance to be able to avoid this with a dexterity saving throw. But otherwise, all hands are off. But if you don't want to use this test altogether, another great way to use the Nothic is to kind of play them like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Have them stalk the party, just salivating over the magic items that they're carrying, really focusing in on the party member that has the either rarest magic items or the most amount of magic items on them. For our next regular encounter at level 2, you can use 2 Varg Wheel. These guys are the perfect monster to really set the mood for any demon and devil-filled campaign story, as they're the very common, very basic demon fodder monster. These guys can appear at any time a demon is summoned or fail to be summoned. So here are 2 suggestions on how you can start this encounter. The first one being, your party shows up to a summoning ritual by either cultists or anyone really that's trying to summon a demon. But regardless of the success or failure of this ritual, all they hear is a pair of screeching shrieks as these 2 Varg Wheel apparate out of thin air and either finish off the cultists or immediately start wreaking havoc on the party. While the second option would be having the party arrive to what once was a ritual site, but everything feels very eerily quiet. There are a few bodies strewn about, and they don't really understand what killed them. But as they approach 2 of the bodies, thinking that they might still be alive, they see the final moments as their face twists and contorts into hideous figures and twists off the body, turning into Varg Wheel themselves as they've been cursed. That's gonna be a really fun scene to narrate to your party and kind of see the horror appear on their faces. They're like, what the heck is happening? And then all that just happens, and then they immediately just open up with their shrieking stun. Oh, that's gonna be such a fun start to the encounter, and I mean, I doubt any player is going to see that coming. And then after that initial screech, they just kind of attack anyone that's close or anyone at random. There's no real intelligence for these creatures, and they just kind of throw their lives away. But have fun with it. Just stun and screech and attack and bite and try to curse someone. And then maybe, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on how you see it, that curse can really strike some fear into the party as they try to find a way to cure themselves of it, so one of them doesn't also become a Varg Wheel attacking everyone too. For our first elite encounter for level 2, we have 1 Bone Naga. Now, as a DM, there are never enough opportunities to give your party magic items, and they will never cease to ask for more magic items. And honestly, this is a perfect encounter to do just that. The Bone Naga is such a great monster to utilize to defend any type of magic item that you want to give the party, or any MacGuffin that the party is looking for their current quest. Now, the Bone Naga itself comes in 2 different flavors. There's the defensive Naga, which is the Guardian, which I would recommend for a magic item that you want to reward the party, or there's the aggressive style, the Spirit Naga. I would use this one in a MacGuffin situation. Have this Bone Naga lie in wait around the treasure as just a normal corpse amongst many different bone corpses in this room, so the party thinks nothing of it. But then as they get close to the magic item in MacGuffin, it rises up slowly. They hear the bones rustling and rattling, the small weird shadows looming over them, and then it all begins. It's so much fun, the different ways you can use a Bone Naga. If you're going with a defensive route though, and using the Guardian stat block, start the encounter with Shield of Faith to really boost up its AC. But if you're going with the aggressive style and the MacGuffin route, start the encounter off with a strong lightning bolt, because more likely than not, the party will be kind of lined up or grouped up, so you can get at least 2 to 3 of them. The Bone Naga is such a great way to really make the party feel like they earned that coveted magic item or overcame that final challenge to get that MacGuffin. As for our final elite encounter for level 2, we have 2 Intellect Devourers. Now, I know the purpose of my encounter series is to show you guys cool and unique new encounters that showcase underutilized monsters, but honestly, with how iconic Intellect Devourers are, I don't really hear or have seen a lot of people use them in their campaigns. I think it's because more often than not, most DMs would rather just use Mind Flayers because they're even more iconic. But who cares about that? I think the idea of having 2 rogue Intellect Devourers roaming about doing their own thing is such a fun idea. I would actually say, I think the best way to use Intellect Devourers is really using the fact that they can inhabit other people's bodies first. Don't have them start out regularly on the ground, but already inside of a body. So here are 2 fun ways that you can kind of do this. The first option you have is have the party show up to a small town or village or hut and either everyone's missing or there's only 2 NPCs, but they're being a little weird. Something feels a little off about them. Have the player with the highest intelligence in the party feel a little bit uneasy around them as you start talking with them, as these intellect devourers are salivating, waiting for a moment where they can feast on a fresher, smarter brain than the one they currently ate. Or you can have the party show up to a village as people are freaking out and screaming as they see an intellect devourer jump into someone's body, eating their brain in front of them. But in both these situations, definitely have the bodies be only 1 or 2 hits away from decaying. That way the brains immediately pop out again, because you really don't want to put them inside of a giant meat shield when they can do some nasty attacks still inside that body. Because the biggest concern I have with using intellect devourers is that intelligence saving throws are some of the most underutilized saving throws in the game and are most classes' weakest saving throw, making Devourer Intellect a TPK ready ability. And for our first regular encounter at level 3, we have the Choldrith. So if you had fun using Chitons at level 1 against your party, then it's time to introduce them to the head honcho of these weird deformed spider boys, the Choldrith. This guy is essentially a spider cleric of sorts, and your party has invaded their web church. Every part of this arena should be covered in web in some shape or form, whether it be web bridges adding different layers to this arena, or just webs all over the floor or blocking pathways. That way, the majority of this arena is actually difficult terrain and is constantly activating the web sensibility of the Choldrith. This would make it very easy for the Choldrith to be able to target players that are hiding potentially with its Spectral Dagger, aka Spider Cleric Spiritual Weapon. For the first turn of combat, the Choldrith should actually open up using the Bane ability, trying to get as many of the players as they can as possible. That way, they have an increased chance of getting stuck in the web or being trapped. That way, the Choldrith can come in and slash them up with its dagger. But if they break out, it's gonna play keep away and scurry up columns, hide around pillars, or behind rubble, keeping away from them as best as it can, really taking advantage of the fact that they can't move anywhere near as quickly in this web mess. But if you'd like to have more magical options for the Choldrith, check out the stat block provided in Volo's guide, because in that stat block, it has spells like Healing Word, Sanctuary, and Shield of Faith. Personally though, I think if you are going to go with that stat block route, bump this encounter up to an elite encounter by adding 2 Chitons with it. That way they can act as guards for this spider cleric, really defending them and the town that they are coming from. The Choldrith will obviously cast Sanctuary on itself or Shield of Faith on one of its allies, while saving its Healing Word to really just top someone off or keep them off death's door. Now, moving on to our final regular encounter for level 3, we have 1 Svart Warlock, 2 regular Svarts, and a giant bat. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. We already used Svarts at level 1 and they weren't really that powerful to begin with. And you're right, they really aren't that powerful. But if you give one magic and you have a giant bat that's kind of harassing the casters in the back, it becomes a little bit more challenging. A little bit more. Because now there's a lot more things that your party has to juggle in this encounter. The 2 regular Svarts are going to work just like they did at level 1. They're going to be trying to trip people up, throw rocks at them, and just kind of be a general nuisance. While the giant bat is really going to focus on the casters, making sure that they're either A, breaking their concentration, or B, not able to really get in a good position to affect the other Svarts. While all this is happening, the Svart Warlock will work as a midline fighter, staying a little bit further back, but not so far back that they can't use their Raxavort's Bite. This is a pretty nice range attack the Svart Warlock can do pretty reliably at 30 feet. But if the party manages to swarm him, then he has at least 2 scimitar attacks it can utilize to protect themselves. But that's assuming they don't use Burning Hands first as the party's coming up, or invisibility to run away. However, if you would like to have more spell variety when it comes to the Svart Warlock, check out the old stat block in Volo's guide, which has a lot more options to them, like Eldritch Blast as a proper ranged attack, or Scorching Ray. And now we come up to the last 2 encounters we have for this video. Our first one is going to be 1 Bodak. Bodaks are essentially husks of people, almost mindless in essence, as they devote their entire remaining existence to just bringing death and destruction to everything and everyone around them. As a Bodak is a person who had their heart and soul essentially ripped out of them and become hollow in their service to Orcus. When it comes to popular fiends and demons to utilize in your campaign, there is no doubt that everyone has heard of Orcus at least once or twice, or has wanted to use him in some way, shape, or form. But even if he isn't the main focus or the main demon or villain of your campaign, you can easily use him as a meddlesome third party who just wants to observe, assist, or even obstruct the main storyline. So that makes the Bodak really dangerous or a really interesting encounter, as Orcus can directly interact with the party throughout the fight. It has a destruction aura and even a gaze that can absolutely devastate anyone that approaches it within 30 feet. Honestly, the bow deck is just overall an actual walking ball of destruction, and it's so much fun, the idea of throwing this up against your party. Now, in spite of all this, a bow deck really is something that your party can handle at level 3. It just requires them to do a little bit of planning and not just running straight ahead at it, because that's just going to lead to a TPK. But if your party is the type of party that likes to overplan and really analyze the encounter, and they just completely are stomping the bow deck and you don't like that, well, you could always have Orcus kind of give it some suggestions on how to properly act in this encounter to play a little bit more smartly. But I wouldn't do that too often because it can feel very metagamey and upset your players. As for the rest of its fighting style, it's really just going to go for as much damage as it can, as quickly as it can. It doesn't have a care for its own life, and it doesn't really have a care for who it is that it is causing destruction to. It just wants to spread destruction anywhere and everywhere it can. And now we finally come to our last elite encounter in this video. 1 Darrow Savant and 4 regular Darrow, one of which should have a shield. But I know what you're thinking. This is exactly the same thing as the first level encounter with just 1 extra minion. How much extra damage or difficulty could that 1 extra minion really add to this fight? And honestly, it adds a lot. The Savant has a beam like Lux from League of Legends that just absolutely massacres anyone. Then you can just spam willy-nilly doing 66 radiant damage. Not just that, it's doing this all behind the safety bubble of its 4 Darrow goon squad. That's nightmarish, because now it isn't just your melee players that are in danger, it's even your range players. No one is safe in this encounter, as he just starts blasting beams all over the battlefield, hitting anything and everyone he can. But that's not the only reason why this Savant is so dangerous. It can also cast Spider Climb on itself, allowing it to get into unreachable places by your melee characters, allowing it to just rain death from above or even up alongside the wall where he can't be touched aside from your casters, which the other Darrow are going to focus on, tripping them up, keeping them on the ground, so the Savant could just blast everyone. There's so many ways to play this where the other Darrow are pretty much just playing stay down Mr. President. That's why this can be so chaotic, because while the Savant is blasting things from range, you have the 1 Darrow with the shield acting like its personal bodyguard, while the other 2 work as forward infantry, kind of tackling on the threats before they get to the Savant. And if you really want to be evil, have the Savant cast invisibility at the very beginning of the encounter. That way it can position itself in the perfect manner it needs to try to get 3 to 4 players all lined up in its beam and just blast them all at once. And then it just keeps blasting and it doesn't stop blasting. And yeah, like you just Lux beam spam all over the battlefield, and that alone is scary. So if you found this video helpful and enjoyable, give this video a like and comment down below what are your favorite monsters to use in the Underdark. And if you'd like to see more encounters for levels 4 and 5 to use in the Underdark, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss when I release that video. See you guys next time.